All right. So, welcome everyone. I am Neely Hale. I'm president of the Junior League of Lake Charles. If you are not familiar with our organization, we are a group of women, and the main parts of our mission is to promote volunteerism and also develop the potential for women. And one of one of the ways we do that is by training our members and our volunteers, and we are excited to extend that training out to the community of other nonprofits in our Lake Charles area. This is our third of 5 weeks of virtual training for nonprofits, and we are excited to bring you two speakers this week. One of them is a past president of the Junior League of Lake Charles, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Judson for introductions.
Awesome. Thank you, Neely. Yes, on behalf of the Community Foundation, we thank you for being here. We thank the Junior League for helping to make this happen. We are excited to be in session number 3, and I wanted to share a few highlights from the second session. Many of you were a part, but I know we have some new people in each one. Some of those were about recruiting board members. I think that was a really big takeaway for a lot of us. The importance of being prepared and having a really thorough and transparent conversation with potential board members, and talking about things like how they would like to contribute, whether it's their time, their talent, their resources, their influence, and the responsibilities of being an active and an engaged board member. So it looked like that really hit home with a lot of people that want to maybe up their game a little bit in the way that we think about recruiting and having people that really support our mission and want to be a part of that. Also some good feedback about the difference in the board and an advisory board. So that was very valuable. And also the importance of having a diverse board, and that being diverse in a lot of ways, including the age. So I think people really had some takeaways about thinking of younger professionals that maybe we kind of usually wait till they're a little bit older, but really there's value in the diverse group of people serving on a board. So that was really exciting to hear a lot of good feedback related to board development and how that impacts fundraising. Really that link was very important, and I think came through for a lot of folks. And I wanted to highlight one thing. If people did not see this, I encourage you, and we'll send a link. My husband, Mark, who's with the Southwest Louisiana Law Center, it made such an impact for him that as he wrote an article for the American Press that was on Tuesday's paper, he wrote it basically about the importance of board membership and how it's so important for people who want to give back to your community to do that in a really strategic and meaningful way by serving on a board. So we'll let y'all read that if you haven't already. So great takeaways, and looking forward to what we'll learn today. To remind you, Beverly will be doing our training. That will be for about an hour, and then she will have question and answers with our local experts, and I'll introduce them in just a minute. And you are welcome to use the chat box as we go along, and if we don't answer it right then, Beverly will call that out to her toward the end, and it can be a part of the Q&A. And you're also welcome to use the chat box while she's having the conversation with our guest panelists, and we'll be watching those to be able to include your questions there too. We will do our best to keep everybody on mute so that we can communicate as effectively as possible. And a reminder that all of our sessions are being recorded, and we'll post them on the Community Foundation website and the Junior League website whenever they are available. They're very robust sessions in the 2 hours, so it sometimes takes a little while for us to get it out there, but that is the goal. So now I am ready to welcome again Beverly Brooks Thompson. And for those of you who might be new, I'll give you a little heads up about Beverly and her experience. She is both a published academic and a practitioner in the field of philanthropy. She's held senior executive positions at LSU and Women's Hospital in Baton Rouge, and she's worked with clients ranging from Sun Devil Stadium to the Carnegie Museum systems to the local chapter of the Boy Scouts. So quite a variety. And she's done that not only in her professional role, but personally as well. And I think that really speaks to her abilities, and she can really share from a professional perspective as well as personally interacting as a board and a fundraiser. And I think one of those claims to fame is she's helped organizations raise over 1.7 billion in her career. So we have the chance to learn from an expert in the field. So Beverly, we appreciate you sharing your skills with Southwest Louisiana. And we are also very excited to have some local experts in the field be a part of today's session after our training part takes place. And one of those is Richard Reed. And I don't know about you, but when I think about people in our region that know how to build relationships and know how to connect people with causes that are really important to them where they can make a difference, I think about Richard Reed. And he has been with McNeese, as most of you know, for 40 years, amazing, and 33 of those years have been in development. It's amazing that when he started with the McNeese Foundation, they had $1 million or thereabouts. And as he retires from being the vice president of advancement there, they are at 68 million and over 80 million in assets.
Wow.
So amazing work. And if you are about town anywhere, you see Richard, because that's part of his building relationships as he is out and about. Richard holds degrees from the University of Arkansas, which I never knew that part, Richard.
Razorbacks. Oh no.
And this summer, he transitioned to the special assistant to the president, and he plans to retire in October. We'll see if that really happens, but that's the plan. And then I'm also happy to introduce for our later segment, a good friend of mine, Willie Mount. And she has been on the McNeese Foundation for a good while, since 1990. She's a McNeese alum, and she is still one of their biggest cheerleaders. If you don't know, Willie actually was a McNeese cheerleader, and she still can wear her cheerleading uniform.
Wow.
In addition to wearing her blue and gold, she has served in various roles for the McNeese Foundation, including secretary, vice president, and president. She's worked on several campaigns for the foundation, including the Endowment for Excellence, Building a Solid Foundation, and the 75 for 75. She's also worked alongside Richard, as well as McNeese presidents Dr. Robert Hebert and Dr. Philip Williams, to secure major gifts for academic scholarships, athletic enhancements, as well as campus improvement. And so Richard and Willie have lots of experience working together for McNeese, and we're excited that when we get to that part of our training today, that will be willing to have Beverly facilitate a conversation. And again, you're welcome to add questions in the chat room when we get to that part. So thank you all so much for being here, and I will turn it over to Beverly.
Well, thank you. And I am just tickled that once again we have such amazing hosts and incredible guest speakers. You know, I have to be honest. When you sit in the shoes of a consultant, I think people presume some things, and you know, even we get intimidated and nervous. Richard Reed is a hero in the field, and frankly could give this talk anywhere, anytime, anyhow in the country. So I'm super excited to have the opportunity to quiz him later today. And of course, Willie Mount is a hero in many ways. And when we were talking about introducing Willie, we said, you know, it'll take 2 weeks to introduce all of the service that she has. Let's keep it to McNeese. And when you ask her what her top 3 philanthropic priorities are, McNeese is top of that list. So I'm super excited about the end of this. And I want to kick off today really saying campaigns and major gifts are my wheelhouse. This is when people ask what in the world of fundraising, where you like to live, this is particularly my space. And I enjoy it. The good news is it's my space. The bad news is this is a lot of information. And part of that is because I want you all to know all of the things. So I'm going to go through these slides, and from a training perspective, and some of them I'm going to touch on very lightly so that you have the information, but and from the recording, but I also wanted to make sure that you had information in slides that as you go back to your individual organizations that you could refer back to. So I know if I'm skipping some information, I'm going to hit the highlights and what is the most important, because I really want to get to the Q&A with Richard and Willie at the end. Now, I have had some feedback. People have said, gosh, we've had a lot of folks from big organizations, and certainly we have, and we'll talk about that. But when we talk about campaigns and when we talk about major gifts, that is really defined by each organization. Each organization has to decide what is a major gift for their organization and what is a big or small campaign for their organization. I've worked on campaigns as small as $500,000, and I've worked on campaigns as large as $1.5 billion. So all money is hard to raise, and it's all relative to where your organization is in the journey and what the readiness is. But to start at the beginning today, I really want to talk about, and you've heard a lot about Carter. Carter, we're in the philanthropy space, as you know, and you can read that. But I really want to define for everybody on the call and start with the basics of what is a campaign. Because depending on who you are and where you are, you use that word differently. So some people think marketing campaign, some people think political campaign. When we're in the fundraising space talking about big campaigns, the definition really is an intense effort to raise funds for a particular need from the private sector through multi-year pledge commitments within a specified time. It is a specific project for a specific need over a period of time with a start and a stop to the campaign. And what it really is how are we going to raise the most money for the highest priorities at the most efficient cost while strengthening lifelong relationships. So for this purpose, campaigns are generally over and above all of the other fundraising that you do. And when I say over and above, it means your normal fundraising operations don't stop. A campaign is in addition to for a special project or need. So traditional campaigns typically require a sound organization, an organization that is not in fear of closing its doors, for example. It needs a board commitment and giving, so 100% giving by the board. We talked about that last week. A campaign really has to have a timetable. It needs a start and a finish with benchmarks in between, and we'll talk about that. It needs an articulated case for support. And you'll remember from our first discussion, it's the who, what, when, where, why, how much document. It requires a sufficient and qualified pool of prospects to go to, and hopefully a lead donor or 10, and significant contributable dollars within your file. And when I use the word file, I mean your database system of all of the people that are involved with your organization. Do you have a qualified pool of prospects? And we're going to talk about what a qualified pool looks like. So we believe that the 5 campaign essentials are: you have to have sound leadership. That includes board leadership and that includes administrative leadership. So that is not just the board of directors, but the executive director of the organization, leadership within the organization. So for example, If you have services that you provide with expertise, that means those experts have to be on board. So I had a phone call earlier today with an organization that is an animal welfare site, and they do rehabilitation of marine animals. Well, it's real important to have the lead veterinarian, the medical doctor in that organization, and all of her team involved. So it's not just the fundraising leadership, it's not just the board leadership, it's all of the leadership within an organization. Of course, that case for support, and you're going to hear that a lot today: sufficient contributable dollars, adequate resources, and essential, well-organized campaign cabinet. Adequate resources could include your people, your processes, your donors, space. Well-organized cabinet is really your volunteers that are going to roll up their sleeves and help you get the job done, because peer-to-peer fundraising is the most effective fundraising that there is. And I should say involvement of peers, not necessarily the solicitation. So really, what are the fundamentals of campaign planning? Well, a chart of standards, or what other people refer to as a gifts pyramid, those things are used interchangeably. Now, don't let that $25 million number at the bottom scare you. That could just as easily be $1 million. That could just as easily be $500,000, because all money is hard to raise. What you need to see in this donor pyramid that I'm showing you is that the top investment is typically 15 to 20% of the goal. The top 10 investments, i.e. the top 10 donors to any one campaign, make up typically 50 to 55%. I'm going to say this because I can see Richard on the phone while I say it. Right now, in many cases, we're seeing the top 10 donors making up 70% of a campaign. It's that old 80-20 rule. 80% of the money comes from 20% of the people, and that's really true in campaign world. Now, the next 50% of your money typically is in smaller gifts, and that can be 250 to 500 people and or organizations that are making up that goal. Now, you see here on the left, the quiet phase of a campaign typically makes up over 50% of your gifts. We're consulting clients now that it's really 50 to 65, 70% of your gifts in the quiet phase before you go public. And that means that you're getting people on board, invested with you, asking for your front gifts on the front. Now, we're going to talk a lot about a feasibility study or a planning study. That's when consultants come in and they interview your top prospects to see, is this the right organization? Do you have the adequate resources? And do you have the right leadership? And is this a case for support that they'll follow? So I'm going to refer back to this, but really, we say in the consulting world that if you're going to embark on a campaign, that you have to win it on paper. So I usually hand somebody a spreadsheet that has the numbers from the top 10 gifts. Who do you know? We need one prospect that can give us $5 million to give us this gift. Well, I need to know 3 potential to 4 potential prospects that have the ability and the inclination to give $5 million to get one gift from there. Who has the ability and capacity to give a gift of $2.5 million? And you go on down the list. So as you do that and you start filling out your spreadsheet, you win it on paper by who has the affinity and the ability to give gifts at this level, and literally putting it into a spreadsheet of who do we even think we could possibly ask for these potential gifts. So it really starts here. So comprehensive campaigns, and what is the difference between a capital campaign and a comprehensive campaign? Well, these days, and many times, those things are used interchangeably. A capital campaign is technically a bricks and mortar campaign. It's for building or infrastructure. A comprehensive campaign will typically include more than just infrastructure. So, for example, Richard at McNeese, I would bet, without having a previous conversation, that any campaign he runs is going to fall in categories of student support, faculty support, campus infrastructure, which is capital projects, and program support, all the things that happen inside of those buildings. And if you're a bigger school like McNeese, probably athletics. And almost everything would fit inside of that. That would also include your annual fund. That might include endowment campaigns. So a comprehensive campaign, a lot of people will say it's everything in the kitchen sink that you're raising money for that particular period of time at a higher level. So we use those words, comprehensive campaigns and capital campaigns. Frequently, you'll hear those used the same. Don't get hung up on that. What it is that time frame over and above dollars. So what do comprehensive campaigns demand more of? A personalized one-on-one multi-channel communication strategy. Now, what does that mean? One-to-one. Well, it's a person and a person having a relationship. It's also the type and vehicle of communication that you use with your donors. Are you talking to your donors and receiving information back from them in a way that helps move them up a donor pyramid, helps them engage in an organization? Now, data-driven strategies are ways in which you acquire new donors, you identify hidden mid-level opportunities, so those that are in the middle of your gift pyramid, and are you segmenting and prioritizing your donor database based on wealth screenings, based on who their peers screens are, so any peer data that you can find, i.e. asking other people who they know that might want to give. And behavioral data. So RFM scores are recency frequency metrics. Now that sounds really fancy. And so does behavioral data. Gosh, I just want to know who my donors might be. How am I going to know their data? Well, I'm going to show you. When you're engaging with your donors and really involving in the process, there are different ways for them to show you that they have an affinity for the organization. One of those is showing up to an event. One of those is clicking on an email. Are you tracking the behavior? How recent and how frequent are they engaging with you? And it's not just about the money, not just about how often do they give or how much do they give, but also how are they engaging with you? And do you have multi-channel communication strategies in order to communicate with them? And are you tracking that data? That's one of the questions that you need to ask yourself as you're even considering a campaign. Now, metrics and accountability plans are generally around those of us in development. Are we keeping ourselves accountable? Are we professional visitors? Are we identifying, qualifying our donors? Are we cultivating them to major gifts? Are we actually asking them for gifts? And frankly, are we moving them up the pyramid, if you will, through major engagement? So metrics and accountability plans on how we're going to hit those goals is important. And then finally, systems and processes that move from a culture of charity to a culture of philanthropy. Charity is transactional. Philanthropy is relationship. It's built on relationships, deep, long-term relationships within an organization. So all of this is just words on a page. What is that really? Well, you've seen this slide before. We've talked about prospect intelligence, and that's really who do we know and how are they interacting with us? What kind of behaviors are they displaying with us through social media, through face-to-face contacts that we have, people that say, hey, I talked to Tom, my next door neighbor who happens to be a McNeese grad, you should give him a call. Are we putting that information and tracking that information? How are people responding to direct mail, or are they engaging with the videos that we show, or the web sites that we post up, and the interactive things that we do? And are we having what we call catalyzing contacts to move them down the pyramid? Are we analyzing our database to say, gosh, Beverly's only given us $100, but she's shown up at this event. She constantly engages with us on Facebook. And, you know, people in the community say that she's really generous. Maybe we should invite her to a meeting. Maybe we should invite her for a tour for our organization. Are we having I can't say that word today, catalyzing contacts based on what a donor's engagement and behavior are? And is that information that we're feeding and sending out there being received appropriately to get engagement? We're not just sending information out, we're receiving it, and most importantly, tracking it. So what does that look like? Well, this is the Baton Rouge area Komen, Susan G. Komen website. And I pulled this one specifically because it is a small nonprofit, but they are doing this really well. They are not a client of mine. I just watch them because I'm passionate about women's health and making sure women don't have breast cancer, but also because I think they do a really nice job. So one of the things that they did is they've got a fundraise for us button. So share your story. People have the opportunity to send them, here's the story that I had about my mom having breast cancer, or me going through my journey of cancer, or I'm a caregiver, or I ran, did the Komen walk. They share their stories. Somebody on the back end of that goes through those stories and says, hey, can we publicize that? And they put it on their website. So each of these people is talking about their story. And I believe, because I watch these things, that these people, if they're on somebody's website, are probably going to share that on social media. Are you tracking that information? Are you inviting people to tell their story? Are you engaging with them? Are you asking them to interact? Well, most systems these days have an opportunity for you to put a personalized URL if you send a direct mail piece. That personalized URL, if I get that and I make a donation, or I tell you, hey, go to this website, you land on the website, and I know that Richard has landed on the website. That microsite has information based on all of the things we do. It might say, tell us your story, engage in this event, here's some more information about assisting somebody that has breast cancer. Here's ways to engage with us if you need more information. We're gathering data. Oh, magically, 3 weeks later, 2 weeks later, Richard gets a personalized letter from us that says, hey, Richard, this is Komen. We'd like to invite you to come to a tour. Gosh. 3 days later, the phone rings because I'm tracking this data in my website, and I know in my funnel that he's engaging with us. And I say, hey, Richard, would you like to come to a tour? This is Beverly. You might have received a letter from us. We'd like to have you come tour the facility and see really what we're doing over here. And Richard says, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I've been seeing your stuff everywhere. I just got a letter. You know, I don't know about you, but every time I look on Nordstrom's to shop for shoes in size 11, because I have big feet, in red patent, for the next month, every time I open or Google something, I get what I call a sign from God. The little banner advertisement happens to have all the shoes that I like in the right size at the right time. When I open up my Facebook page, gosh, lo and behold, same shoes are showing up. It's magical. It's actually not magical. That's consumer data. And most databases these days, and most systems, even something as simple as Constant Contact and or websites, have the ability free for in Google to track the donor engagement. This is what people are doing. And then we invite you, and then we send you a thank you letter, and we continue this cycle. Well, when somebody lands on my web page, I can track where exactly they're looking. Are they looking at the risk factors? Are they looking at diagnosis? Are they looking at donate? And what interests them? I'm capturing that information, and then I'm feeding them what they want. So I start feeding them information, and I capture one of those stories. One of those stories is phenomenal. I look at that person's Facebook page and know that, hey, she's got 10,000 followers. This is somebody that I need to talk to. This happens to be a woman named Krista Allen-Waving, who is the Vice President of Development at the LSU Foundation. But this article appeared in Baton Rouge Business Report. This cycle is a real cycle. This is not a super big, sophisticated organization like a university or a hospital per se. They've got 2 development people, but they've enlisted smart ways to engage their donors and get their donors and their board members telling the story for them. So, are you doing that? Are you thinking through how to get people through your pipeline? Now, in a campaign, why is that important? Because one of the things that you have to do is qualify and identify donors. One of the things that campaigns do for you when you start considering them is it helps you not just raise money, but it also helps you solve some maybe non-monetary goals. So many times we find people have to invest in information systems. They have to strengthen their staff through training and development to get ready. Very few people go into a campaign in their career, and if they do, they may just happen to have one. So most people have to train up. It helps improve communications. It certainly improves your public awareness. It helps you identify future leaders, because if you're engaging people in the campaign, you'll find future leadership. And it helps improve donor relations. And what we know about donor relations and stewardship is it's all about engagement. So even if you're doing things as simple as I showed you before, you're engaging donors. Campaigns also provide you an excellent opportunity to lift people to a higher philanthropic priority. So for example, if your annual fund, which we'll talk about next week, is capping at a certain level and people are pretty stagnant in the amounts that they're donating, a campaign will sometimes elevate that. You might have a peak in donations in the campaign, but you're going to plateau after the campaign at a higher level. It also gives you the opportunity to put an emphasis on larger gifts. Even in those, if you've got small level donors, they can stretch to be mid-level donors. Hopefully, it helps you increase the number of annual supporters, and it helps you identify future campaign volunteers and leadership. If you are in long-term relationship with your donors, which you should be over the lifetime of an organization, and more importantly over the donor's lifetime, you're identifying core volunteers and leadership to help you over the next 10, 15, 20 years, and I can't wait to ask Richard some of those questions. Now, just because your organization thinks they're ready for a campaign, your donors and your volunteers might not be ready. I work with a K through 12 school here in Louisiana, and they first called me 2 years ago and said, we want to raise $100 million. And my statement was, of course you do. Do you have the ability to do that? Do you have adequate resources? Do you have the leadership? And when I showed them the donor pyramid, can you fill out a spreadsheet with who your potential donors are based on that donor pyramid? The organization looked a little shocked. And over a couple of years of training, donor cultivation, they've settled on a $5 million campaign. And a $5 million campaign is huge for them. And that's great. And based on that $5 million campaign, they've had 2 years to get their donors and their volunteers ready, and they're just embarking on what we call the quiet phase. So what happened in those 2 years? I started asking questions, and they realized that they did not have consensus on their goals. They didn't really have a sense of direction about what they wanted to raise money for. They just knew that they needed to raise more money for the school. And there was kind of a disconnect between what the purpose of the institution was and some of the activities that they were doing from a fundraising perspective. And when we tried to draw lines for a strategic plan, it was just a bunch of stuff. They were doing a bunch of stuff, but it wasn't necessarily organized. So we spent some time helping them get organized. And we find a lot of organizations, when they really start boiling down what they need to raise money for, they find themselves in a scenario that pushes them back a step to needing to go back to a strategic plan. So what does that really mean? Again, leadership, compelling and emotional case for support, sufficient dollars, adequate resources, a well-organized campaign cabinet. I'm going to say those again, but let's talk about what the planning requires. It requires a consensus of the board. It requires a consensus of the board. If only one board member wants to do this, it's not going to be successful. If only the staff wants to do a campaign, it's not going to be successful. All of the people have to agree that they are going to be all in. It has to be a priority of the administration. The development staff has to be ready. And that means trained up and engaged with their donors, having been in more than a 3-month relationship with their donor base. It absolutely requires the participation and involvement of the program staff, and it requires an understanding of donor and volunteer readiness. So an investment in the strategic plan, many organizations, when they're starting to consider a campaign, they go back and poke holes in their strategic plan and make sure that the campaign is raising money for the same things that are the outcomes of the strategic plan. So what is the mission of the organization? What is the vision? Do we have measurable objectives with deadlines? Do we have a plan to reach those objectives? Do we have resources to fund the plan? And then once you think your plan is solid, your strategic plan is solid, then you go back to the case for support. And that's really the fundraising piece of a strategic plan. What is central to our mission that we cannot do now, but could do with more private sector income. So when some organizations go back to their strategic plan, you come up with a pie, if you will. We're going to take care of this in capital outlay. We're going to take care of this in earned income. We're going to do this in the gift shop, whatever that is for you. But what is really going to require philanthropic support in private income? And it's over and above annual fundraising. And it goes back to the question we talked about in the last 2 weeks is, who do we want to be 10 years from now? Who do we really want to be 10 years from now that we can't be now, that private philanthropic support can help us get to? And the case for support is a literal document that has to be developed by the administrative leadership. It has to be tested by the board. The board has to be able to have some buy-in to that. And your constituents really need to be a part of the process. Maybe not in the actual writing of it, but certainly in the presentation and asking their feedback. And who are your constituents? Well, it's different for everybody. Maybe it's alumni, maybe it's grateful patients, maybe it's customers to your organization. But you need to ask them, are we on the right track, and get some feedback in a protected way before you go putting this out in the public on website and trying to raise money. It also should, you should test your case with community members. So I'll tell you, and you might not appreciate it, but I'm positive that the Junior League president, and Sarah over the Community Foundation read a lot of cases for support of organizations that are considering going into a campaign. And they get feedback. You know, how do you think this would resonate with your donors? Do you think we're on the right track here? And those are good people to test it with. And others is really dependent on your particular organization. So the case has to be able to answer that document that shows this is what we're raising money for, has to talk about how will the project serve the community, where, if it's a building, where will it be located, what will it look like, who gets the most benefit from it, how much will it cost, how much will it cost to maintain once it's built, if it's a particular building, and if it's a building, when will it be built, when's it going to be developed, who's going to be implemented, when's it going to be completed. And somebody asked the question about naming. Are there naming opportunities surrounded by that? Are there public-private partnership opportunities? So sometimes donors will dream bigger than you dream in your case for support, and you need to know whether or not you can answer all of these questions, and if it goes back to your strategic plan as a highlight and something that will implement that and really raise the organization's priorities, and can you complete it within your time frame? So vision-infused fundraising, we talked about this too. Campaigns only work because they force organizations to articulate the vision of what are the needs and threats, what is inspirational and transformational. And if a campaign is not inspirational and transformational, it will fail. I'm going to say that again. It has to be inspired and it has to be transformational. And that's not necessarily a brand. That's a, how many lives are you going to change because you're going to do this all in effort? It has to have simply stated tangible outcomes. We're going to raise X amount of dollars and this many people are going to be served. This many students are going to get scholarships. This many patients are, if you're Komen, are going to have free mammograms. We're going to be able to broaden our geography and support. And it also has to have a timeline and clearly articulated investment requirements. If you do this, what is it going to take? What is it going to cost you to do this level of fundraising? Now, in a campaign, generally, this is a timeline. An organization begins steps towards just raising its standards. We're dreaming a little bit bigger. We know we need to do something different because we've got competition in the market, or because we have more demand for our services than we can possibly meet. We've outgrown our facility. I'm working on a church campaign, and they needed a new organ because their 150-year-old organ is falling apart. So we're raising our standards. A strategic plan is scripted, and it's a strategic plan for the organization. Then the organization adopts that strategic plan and conducts internal readiness. Do we have the people, the processes? Do we have that adequate database with people with affinity and interest to give to us? And then we suggest going and having a campaign planning study or a feasibility study. That's generally where you meet somebody like me, where you hire outside counsel to test your case for support and your donor pyramid. And it's literally a consultant sitting down with people that would be your top 50 donors and asking hard questions like, what is the public image of this organization? Can you give me feedback on the case for support? Is this organization in your top 3 philanthropic priorities? Are there other competing campaigns in the area? Are there any reputational issues? And that planning study produces information back to an organization. And generally, your constituents will tell a consultant something that they won't tell you, either because they don't want to hurt your feelings or because they really aren't that interested in what you're doing, or because they're a little worried for you. and what you're doing. And it's good feedback. Once you do that, and you realize that you have all of those 5 campaign essentials, would you go into a quiet phase? Now, these blocks, frankly, can last longer. So there's no necessary time frame on each of these, but I'll show you how long a quiet phase can last. This could be, 3 or 4 years in a quiet phase. And then that public phase is usually only after you have 50 to 70% of your money raised, do you start announcing to the public that, hey, we're in this campaign. Now these days, I kind of eye roll when I'll see in a business report or in the newspaper when somebody says, oh, we're 3 years into a quiet phase, and they're on the cover of that business report. I'm like, you're not so quiet. Are you sure? You might be in your master planning phase, you might be in your strategic planning phase, but sometimes you might want to stay quiet until you're really ready and sure that you can raise all of that money. Now, planning study timelines are usually 4 months. I put this in here so you would have a sense of those for anybody who's actively considering this. Those results, again, will help you endorse the case, a readiness and identification of volunteer leadership, access to volunteers who would be willing to volunteer with you and be a member of your campaign cabinet, who are going to be some of those peer-to-peer leaders. It will test the goal. Is your goal too low or is it too high? Access to lead gifts. Very frequently, people will identify themselves as potential lead gifts. It will also help you with the timing, and frankly, it protects the organization from any negative experience because of the feedback that you get. So that's a campaign. That's the timeline. You know what the key to campaigns is? Relationship and the solicitation of major gifts. And I'm going to move into major gifts here. And major gifts, I want to repeat, are different for every organization. Sometimes in an organization, a major gift is defined as $10,000 or more. Sometimes it's $25,000 or more. Sometimes it's $100,000 or more. It really is based on your organization, but it's generally consistent in your pipeline of what is considered a small gift versus what is a mid-level gift and what is a major gift. So let's talk about fundraisers who raise money that are major gift people. And this could be the president of the organization or executive director or some dedicated staff. But in general, good fundraisers, good major gift fundraisers are planners, they're passionate, they're persistent, and they're patient. So a planner, what's the advantage of being a planner? You know that there's an architecture to fundraising strategy. It's not just, hey, Johnny, saw that you gave a major gift over there. You shoulda, woulda, coulda made a gift to my organization. There's actually a strategy and a plan for every major donor. You understand what that plan is. You study your prospect. You know their interests, not the interest of yours that you're projecting on them, but what are they passionate about? What issues and problems do they want to solve? You have a plan for each to be successful, and it looks for benchmarks in confirming the process. Are you checking yourself against what your plan is? Major gift fundraisers are also passionate. You have to be passionate about the organization and what you're raising money for. There are some things I promise you I cannot raise major gifts for, but there are other things that I get real excited about. If I don't believe in the organization, I'm probably not going to be a good major gift officer or be able to speak to the organization. But it has to give fuel to me. We as fundraisers aren't necessarily motivated by money. We're motivated by altruism and doing good in the universe. So it's got to give us fuel, whatever we're raising money for. It's got to draw us closer to our prospects. We have to find the connection with our prospects. It helps us overcome flaws because we're not all good at everything. drives the donors. You have to know their passions. And it really gives us some symmetry to why humans respond to different things. We have to be persistent. We have to bridge failures and disappointments. The reality is that no is going to happen. And how we react to that is part of the relationship that we're building. It's part of the dialogue. It's not the end of the dialogue. Those that are good at raising major gifts, it really has nothing to do with their intelligence or their experience. You have to be persistent, and you have to allow your prospects to consider many options at many times. And sometimes you have to realize that a prospect is just not meant for you. And you have to inspire others to keep going. So you have to be persistent. You really have to be persistent if you're going to raise major gifts inside of a campaign. And you have to be patient. Donors don't give on your timeline, they give on their timeline. And prospects need the time needed to consider their best gifts, not your best gifts, their best gifts. And it has to be guided to the best way, not the easiest way. And sometimes that might involve a lot of family members, and you got to go through all of them. You know, I've said it before, and I mean it on this page. Fundraising's easy, people are hard, and you got to be really patient with the people. And really, it's a long-term relationship game. This is not, hey, I'm going to be at this organization for 2 years and think I'm going to be super successful and move on to the next one. We are in the relationship business, and we should be. I love people like Richard because he's in the relationship business, and he's made a career out of establishing long-term trust and relationship with donors to hit the goals of the organization. Now, what do donors expect in return? They expect access. What does that mean? Well, they probably want to have a conversation with the subject matter expert in your organization, and or the CEO or the president or the researcher in the field, whatever that is. They want to really have impact. It's not as much a return on investment as a return on their impact. They would like to know what impact they had. They want to possibly meet the scholarship recipient. They might want to come to an event that hears from a patient that has been served well. They probably want to get a thank you note talking about that impact. They want leverage in some cases, and that's a real tricky one. And some are actually motivated by recognition. Now, some aren't motivated by recognition, and one of the mistakes that we make as major gift fundraising is thinking that our organizations are for sale and everything needs to be named. And not all donors are motivated by that or interested in that. And so we don't necessarily have to build those if they're not appropriate for our organization. So major gift formula, here's the solicitation team. Do you have a great case for support? Do they have a relationship with the organization? And do they have philanthropic capacity as a donor? So who's the right team with the right ask at the right time with the right relationship to the right person? So we have to identify and qualify our major gift donors. That doesn't mean all of our donors aren't important, but if you want major gifts, you're going to have to focus on the ones that have wealth capacity, a relationship to the organization. I'm going to say that again, a relationship to the organization. They have to have values or interests that align with the organization. Ooh, forgive that. They have to have made gifts before. They have to make gifts to others, and they have to make gifts in other places. So one of my challenges when I talk to organizations and talking to board members and campaign cabinets are the words shoulda, coulda, woulda. This person lives here, they made a major gift over here, they should have made that to us, they ought to, they must, it's their money. It's their money. And if they're giving it to somebody else, that's Mr. Sims, that's Mr. somebody else's money. Do they have a relationship with you? And if not, do they have an interest in something, and can you introduce yourself to them, introduce the organization? So your own file, your own database is the best place to start looking for major gifts, not other people's donor recognition walls. Now, what are accelerators to major gifts? Identifying a donor's philanthropic priorities, introducing the donor to the subject matter experts, involving the donors and identifying others who might be interested, and involving donors in making the ask. Asking them to help you ask other people. So here's our donor, plus you identifying their interests increases the gift. Otherwise, they're just making a transactional gift. Having a conversation with somebody and identifying what are your top 3 philanthropic priorities? Why are you making gifts here? Of the things in our case, what resonates the most with you? What doesn't resonate with you? That's what increases gifts. Now, the impact of multiplication is, here's the donor, here's you, the fundraiser. Add in a leader or a program expert. So maybe the CEO of an organization, maybe the person who's the veterinarian in the hospital that I described, who is the subject matter expert that they want access to. And then those gifts start getting bigger. In the university world, I would suspect, here's the donor, here's Richard, here's maybe the researcher who's doing amazing things in the field of science in a conversation, and that's why McNeese has gotten this larger gift. Who's the right team at the right time to engage the donor towards a bigger gift. Now, the impact of peers in philanthropy has been researched extensively. So peers assisting in the ask. Y'all heard last week Laura Leach talk about, I made a major gift to this organization. I trust them. I vouch for them. They're one of us. I'd like to invite you to make a gift in return. Those gifts are typically higher when a peer, i.e. a board member or somebody on a campaign cabinet, a group of volunteers to help you through your campaign, those gifts become higher. So the impact of peers really is where mega gifts come in. Here's the donor, here's the fundraiser, here's the, president or the scientist. Here's a peer saying, they're one of us. I've given, I'm going to invite you to give. That's when we start having very large gifts. So the donor continuum looks like this. First, we identify and qualify our donors. We need to know who potential donors might be. We do that based on who's been making gifts to our organization, who's behaving in a way and raising their hands through, I'm coming to your events, I'm liking your page on Facebook, I'm going to the tours, and then you build that trust and relationship. You ask them their passion. You match a philanthropic passion to what is in your organization, and then you start facilitating next steps. The best gifts come, the biggest gifts come when you ask a donor, after all of the identified building trust, locating passion, matching philanthropic gifts, if I were to bring you a proposal, what would that look like for you? What would be the most meaningful? It would need to be in that conversation for you to feel trust, and as if you had all of the information that you needed to make that ask. Donors sometimes, when you do this right, will say, I'd like a proposal for this. Bring me that. And by the way, bring the president of the organization. Or I'd really like to talk to the veterinarian. And then you thank them, you thank them, you thank them. Now, not anywhere on here is this about the money. It's about what's meaningful to the donor. It's about the relationship between the donor and the organization. You are simply a conduit to moving them through this relationship. Now, I have put some information on moves management. For those of you in a more sophisticated organization, moves management is a system and a process and a plan for building a relationship to move individual prospects into engaged, passionate donors. Now, specific to each donor is a plan that increases their engagement, their involvement, their understanding, and this is a process by which you go through to, in every engagement, in every visit, one of these things has to happen after every move. The prospect will feel this. The prospect will know this about us. I will know this about the organization. Otherwise, if you're just having coffee with somebody, you're just having coffee. You need a plan for every engagement. So I have given this to you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I really want to get to the meat in the questions. But moves management is something that more sophisticated organizations start using. So I wanted you to have the way in which you could possibly implement this into your plan. Now, very quickly, fundraising during COVID-19. We've talked about campaigns, we've talked about major gifts. Now, the reality is it is a very interesting time in our history. And many of you, if you have the ability to say, should I be asking for major gifts right now? I would say it totally depends. What I will tell you is that you absolutely focus on the relationship and retention strategies. We need to engage donors. We need to be calling our top donors and saying, hey, how are you? Because we're in the relationship business and we really need to be asking how they're doing. They might have questions about your organization. Some of your organizations are probably very busy right now. If you're in a healthcare space, for example, some of your organizations might be completely shuttered, such as a museum or a theater. So the answer is different, but you really need to engage your top executives and experts in your organization to rewrite a mini case. Invite your donors and prospects to be insiders by hosting meeting updates, engaging in CEO roundtables, subject matter expert calls, virtual tours. So it's very tricky. I would not put major gifts on the table unless you already had a proposal on the table. I would deal with the relationship and really worry about relationship and retention strategies. In campaign world, it depends, again, where you are in the process. If you are in the quiet phase and the planning phase, you need to proceed aggressively forward. You don't know what the timing is going to look like, but those that continue the planning through what is likely to be an economic downturn that's going to last a while, and or a pandemic that's going to last a while. When we come out of it, you're going to be exponentially more ready than your peers who put the brakes on completely. So what does that mean? Build relationships with people, build systems, really get to know people, ask their, qualify them, get your cabinet together if you were thinking about it, just don't announce. Those of you that are in public phases of campaigns, you need to have radically honest conversations with yourselves and each other and your donors about whether or not you need to proceed. So each of these is different. And right this second, 100 days into a pandemic, it really is too early to tell. What history tells us over the last 5 generation cycles of economic downturns and recovery is that those that planned have done better immediately after than those who didn't plan for campaigns because everybody else had to wait another 4 years to get ready. So now plans giving, some people have asked about this. Specifically in COVID-19, if you're an organization that accepts planned gifts, make sure that that information is on your website. Lots and lots and lots of people are updating their wills because it's a very difficult time. And I would include honor and memorial information on your website, but I would be very careful about sending out solicitations for planned giving. In fact, there are some major institutions of higher education that have done that, and it's given them a little bit of a black eye because you don't want to be tone deaf at this time. So have the information available if somebody is seeking it, but tread lightly as far as direct solicitation. I'm giving you this information. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but this disaster is different, mostly because it's not isolated geographically. The good news for Louisiana is that we deal with disaster really well, and we are familiar with it. Specifically where you all are, you've been in routine disasters every 7 or so years, including your recent floods. And economically, you heard me say before that we stay a little flat. Our highs and lows are not as high and low. So that's unfortunately not great in a long-term scenario, but it is actually not a bad thing. Right now, we will actually not feel it as deeply and recover probably more quickly. So I've left this information for you and how you might react to your case for support. And of course, these resources. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to take a sip of water and unmute Richard and Willie, who is here on the call. And I cannot see the chat, so I'm hoping that Sarah can, I'm going to unmute everybody. I'm going to ask all of you to mute yourselves again because I can't see all of you. There's too many on the phone. So if you'll all remute yourselves except for Richard, Sarah, and Willie. We want to see your chat questions, but before, I'm going to go ahead and start with a few questions. Richard, thanks for your patience.
Unmute, Richard. Tell him to unmute.
Richard, I need you to unmute.
Or to call Jennifer to come unmute.
Is that it?
There you go.
Hey,
And we got Willie on it too.
There we go. There we go. Well, hello.
No,
Willie, we're matching.
But no matter how long you worked in this area, I just love going to meetings and learning new things, and also learning some old things or renew the learning that you knew was true, but you just never thought about it, and you try to get back in. And these sessions have been great for me because
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
one of the things that we found out is that if somebody has a good plan, steal it.
We love it. Rip off and
actually
duplicate. Yeah.
go in and if it's working for them, more than like it'll be working for you too. And
Isn't that the truth? We have so many, one of the things I think as fundraisers, people always think fundraising is competitive. And if we really believe the word philanthropy means love of humankind, the nicest people about sharing information are other fundraisers. So I'm super excited to steal information from Richard Reed and Willie Mount. I would love to just tackle how you guys go about setting vision and fundraising in your organization. Richard, where do you start when you're looking at fundraising? How does that look for you? And then
I was not a fundraiser. I'll tell you that right off. And I never planned on being one. But I found out that in the work, and this happened to be library, I could talk to people and I could tell them things. We need this, or, wouldn't it be nice if we had this, or, you could add to the collection and this is how you do it. and ended up raising some money for the library. And the president of the university then looked at me and said, well, if you're doing this well for the library, why don't you do it for the whole school? Now, a lot of people think it's hard, but let me tell you, friends give to friends. And
Okay,
so
say that
more
again.
friends give to friends, and more people that you know, they will introduce you to other people. And a lot of times, if they know that this person is giving to you, they'll say, well, I can do that. And the next thing you know, you've got them involved. And I spend a lot of time cultivating. And luckily, the people here, even though most of them are not McNeese graduates, have become very involved with McNeese and understand what the foundation is trying to do. And the foundation actually started in 65 and
Wow.
not have a fundraiser until 87.
Okay, could you say that again? Because I think a lot of people, when they hear your bio, they think, and they see the incredible success at McNeese, don't realize that it started without a full-time anything. So talk about that. How did you build that?
Well, basically, they started on the basis of asking for scholarship funding. And they would endow as much as they could. A basic scholarship at that time was $10,000. And when I started in 87, they had 50 scholarships. And
Wow.
so from that, as you can see, we started by $800,000. That was about the whole $800,000 was in scholarships. And then once I became involved, I found out that scholarships was just part of it. But I'll tell you one thing that we did with scholarships that I found very successful. We had some extra money, and in our 75th campaign, the board gave to the 75th campaign $1 million. And we did what we call 15 will get you 20. So if somebody gave $15,000 and they could give it over 5 years, we would put $5,000 with it.
As a match. So
Of
you
the match.
leveraged a match.
That's
so back,
And you
remember
cannot
that
imagine-
slide that people want leverage? That's what we're
That's-
talking about. They want to leverage their gift.
That's right. And people love matches. And so,
I do.
I mean, I have people now that say, do y'all still have that match? Which worries me because we've kind of created a monster in that we've got to come up with the money. But that 1 million raised $3 million right off the bat.
That's amazing. Richard, how do you set priorities for fundraising, particularly as you decide to go into campaign? And then I want to ask Willie about her involvement in some of that. But how do you set the priorities for a campaign? How do you decide that that's even something you want to do?
Well, the first thing you do, of course, is get the commitment of administration. Because especially people that give you large sums, they want to meet with the big boys. And so I always made sure, you know, that I had the ear of the administrator, which is always the president or a vice president even, and or even sometimes a football coach. But whoever that I thought would actually.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
That's right.
You see that behind me, right? Yeah.
Well, and you know, that's a big thing for somebody to have dinner with.
Access. They want access to somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And with that, of course, I went to the board, and the board helped me enormously just through knowing people and knowing whether or not they were able to actually come up with the amount of money I thought they should. A lot of times I felt like I needed to hold back on that person. And we always had somebody there that knew if somebody owed IRS or something, and then say, this is not a good year to approach them. Even though they may have sold, you know, $5 or $6 million in property that year.
Yeah.
Farther in debt than it looked like. And
So prospect review, having peer review of protected prospects, just really saying, here's somebody
Well,
we're considering approaching. What do you think?
and Willie can speak for the board. I mean, actually, the board is totally valuable. I mean, it's just wonderful with information and in different sectors of life. And so if you have a banker, you know, he knows certain things. And if you have a realtor, he knows certain things. So you need a variety on your board. And at the same time, I guess one of the best, we have one lawyer that is into planned gifts and also into taxation. And a lot of times that will clear up some problems that we might have. And
Gotcha.
yes. Willie,
So
how did you feel?
I think Richard's done a very good job kind of leading the board. And to his comments about board membership, we have a very strong but diverse group. All ages, all levels of education, and all of them are very involved in their own way. And so I think the success that the foundation has had has truly been because of that very diverse membership board.
Yeah.
Richard has
We
said,
always do that.
you've got an attorney, you've got a CPA, you've got somebody that owns their own business, soup to nuts as we call it.
Yeah.
The significance of that is we can sit down at a committee meeting or even an ad hoc committee and talk about how are we going to celebrate our 75th. And you have a real mix of people. There's no agenda, just let it rip. And those ideas just begin to pop. And before we know it, you know, we've come up with a plan, again, with Richard's leadership, as well as solicit who's the right person to head this up. In our case, it was Rick Reshore. Interestingly enough, Rick is an LSU grad.
Yes. He was on my Forever LSU campaign cabinet.
But
He's
he
a
married
terrific human.
McNeese grad. So he is as loyal to McNeese as he is to LSU. And he opened so many doors for each of us if we went as a pair or made phone calls or however we did it. So it was a very successful campaign that when we started talking about it, seemed like, ooh, I don't know if we can do this. But we did. We surpassed it, didn't we, Richard? We surpassed
Yes.
Oh.
So Rick, when you all started planning for a campaign, because any campaign is audacious. I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Walk me through the conversations maybe at the board level. Did you look at a donor pyramid? Did you talk about potential donors? Did you talk about volunteer leadership? Walk through that process. And when did you know that you were ready?
Correct. One of the first things we did, and really you should always do, is where are we now? Let's look at our contributors list and let's process that. Let's talk about who knows, who can call on who, and what are their giving capacities? What are they currently giving? And what do we think they could do? Again, we were asking for a 5-year commitment, you know.
Okay.
So we were asking for bigger dollars, but it's not so painful when you say, you know, you don't have to give it in 2 days. You can do this over 3 years, 5 years, you know, work with them. So that's the issue. The other is to have 100% commitment from your foundation board. So what is it that, and so we asked each other, are you willing to give within your giving capacity, not to put you on the spot, but can you give $75? Can you give $7,500? Can you give, you know, and go up, you know? And so we were able to say when we called people asking for their commitment on this campaign, everybody on our board is committed, you know, so that financial commitment and or volunteer commitment, because again, some people maybe that were not able to contribute financially, that they work so hard helping us to get contributions. So
And
you've got to get that board commitment.
Yeah.
I think that you need to give the leadership, anybody that's working in the foundation, I like for them to be involved with that on some basis. It can be $100 or it can be a couple of $1,000, you know.
Right.
And I know that a lot of people don't do that. They don't think they need to be a member, but they really do, because, you know, it's very nice to say, yes, you know, I'm involved as a donor as well as the person that's going out and asking you for money, because they don't think of that. And I find it that a lot of people appreciate that you're trying to help. You know, I have my own scholarship. I'm trying to get them to give a scholarship, and I can tell them how I felt about giving my scholarship. And we need to know their story and then involve them with their recipient. And one of the things that we did was we had one man on the board. I won't tell you who it was, but in any case, he's the one that came up with the idea of going to 75 million when we were at 58 million, I think.
That's a big old, that's
Yes.
a big leap.
And everybody bought into it. And so first thing we did was have a huge party, which I ended up in the hospital, and my staff, to show how effective they are, they took it over along with Willie, and we had this party for our current donors, so to speak, to announce this new campaign.
That's terrific. Well, Richard, you said something, and this is not a question I thought about asking you, but you said something, because I think it surprises most fundraisers. How important do you think it is that the fundraising staff be donors before they ask? Talk to me about that. What your expectations are around that.
Well, in my case, being the head of the thing, I felt like that, of course, basically, I decided that that's what I wanted to do, was do the scholarship, just because I knew that, one, it was doable, and with my finances, and at the same time, I knew that I would be asking a lot of people that would be in that same level. And from 50 scholarships, we ended up with over 500. So,
that's amazing.
you know, and I think the board really has scholarships in mind. We do professorships and all sorts of different things, but I think that's the involvement. And they want to know that you believe in the thing that you're trying to get them to donate to. And that's a great way of doing it. I never just bring it up, but I'm glad that I did it, because a lot of donors will say, well, that's all fine and good. You know, what are you doing?
Well,
And I said, well, I'm here talking to you. And then I tell them I'm a member.
Yeah, full disclosure, when I was the director of the Forever LSU campaign, I was a single mom, and I made nice money, but I certainly was not in a realm of my peers in the asking, but I felt really good about being a member of the foundation, which was sacrificial to me. I mean, $2,000 a year was all the money in the world to me. But I was a threshold member, and it made me feel better. And I'll tell you, people really noticed that, because they didn't expect me to be wealthy. I worked at a nonprofit, but and even as the president of Women's Hospital Foundation, everybody gave something on the team, and it didn't have to be huge, but they showed up on the roster. And
Our
I think
smallest
that,
gift was $4 for the 75th campaign, but that's $4 I didn't have. And the highest gift was $4 million.
that's amazing.
So
That's amazing. Well, I thought of that, and I think it's important for the crew on the line to hear that if you're not willing to give even something small to your organization, you might want to think about that. Well, Willie, shifting gears, when you have been involved as a board member, in the solicitation process. How do you like to be prepped? What do you need from Richard or his team to be engaged in that process? What does that feel like to you? And talk a little bit about your experience from a board member in the ask, if you will,
Yeah,
or in that process.
For those of us who actually solicit, make direct calls, whether we do it with Richard or with whomever, it's very specifics, which he has always shared is, this is what we're doing, why we're doing it, how much we need, and this is the background, if I don't already know, about different people that we're calling either over the phone or having lunch with them just to visit with them. So you have to be very well prepared and confident in what you're asking. And I think it's important for folks who are willing to fundraise individually like that is don't expect right away success or yet. It may take a letter and then a lunch and then drop by and show you a new leaflet that we've produced that shows you the statistical comparisons and so on. So all those it's a moving sort of there are a lot of moving parts to it. And so patience, two things, and I mentioned this to you when we were talking the last week, and that is Richard's a very good listener. So sometimes you don't think of a fundraiser and a good listener in the same breath, but in fact, that is how you can raise a great deal of money, by listening to what's important to them, if you give them the chance to talk to you about that. And I may have a perception of someone that I think, they're all about this particular school of business or college of engineering. And then they start talking about football, which is, like my second language. I'm there. Let's talk about it. And that was what they were interested in, so you just kind of be a very good listener before you even solicit, or if you do it in a general format, and you may end up going down a complete different pathway, which is kind of fun. Of course, yeah. I like to ask for money. So
you're part of the 3% of the universe that likes to ask for money.
Yeah.
And a lot of people ask me how I ask for money.
Well, I want to know that.
And they say that must be the hardest job,
No.
But you can do it on a golf course. I've raised scholarship money in the grocery store.
Yeah.
Getting out there and having the information, and always, like today, I have a McNeese Foundation shirt on.
I wore blue for you,
by the way. We're blues today, yeah. But I feel like that's very important, because people come up to me, and I may not even remember their name or anything, but we'll start talking, and then the next thing I know, they'd say, well, could you call me next week and let's talk some more, or something like that. But it's being available, and then you find out from that. But one thing I try to do is get as much information as I can, and then I go back to the office. And if I know somebody that knows them, then I call that person and I'll say, well, I met your friend, blah, 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 blah. And then the next thing I know is when they got divorced, when they had their first child, their dog's name, so you gather that information, and it's all usable. You never know when something's going to come up, and you can actually plug in with them that way.
Well, Richard, talk to me about a situation where maybe a board member or a friend of the institution has said, hey, Richard, I really think you should reach out to this person. So you have some information, but it's a little cold. It might feel like a little cold call to you. How do you, well, tell me what a first conversation with a donor looks like. Somebody that may have affinity, they may have capacity because of who referred them. What does that conversation look like to you?
Basically, I've had donors that have brought donors, and we take them to lunch. I mean, and that person will say, well, you know, he's in blah, blah. And so we talk about what he's doing, what kind of money, not actual amounts, but just how much, you know, he's involved and whether he likes football or not. And, you know, if he likes football, then I can get him tickets and so forth and so on and try to see him that way. I've had donors that would be in the stands, and I knew that they were with their grandchildren, and I have cookies delivered to them in the stands and things
That's
like
cool.
that. So it's a real personable and you touchy-feely type thing. I'm a hugger, and so COVID's kind of messed me up. But in any case, you just keep talking and adding, and even now when we're talking about somebody, I can say, well, you know, their ex was, or their child is, or they went to McNeese, but their children went to LSU, or something like that. And it really helps because they feel like that you're a friend. And
you're a connector.
Their connections, and of course, I did, by the way, get a degree from LSU.
Go Tigers! I love that.
As well as McNeese. So I've covered all my bases, even
few.
though Arkansas.
My mom's from Texarkana, so I can't wait to
know.
tell her I was talking to somebody from Arkansas. Well, Willie, what does that first conversation look like for you? You talked about listening. So let's say, you know, on one of the 900 boards that you serve on, I'm kidding, but you're very well known in the community. People talk to you all the time. You see people in different places. What are you listening for, or what would be a cue that you would hear that maybe you say, hey, Richard, this is somebody I'd like to introduce you to? What is that? What are you listening for in those conversations?
Generally, you know, if it's about McNeese, you know, they may share what they graduated in or ask about the new president or, you know, a new professor. And in just engaging them in that kind of conversation and just say, well, you know, would you like to set up a meeting? I mean, I can arrange to have you meet with so-and-so if you would like to do that. And so based on that, then I might understand, well, even though he graduated from, you know, the engineering, he's really interested in the arts. And, you know, so not knowing that, never would have guessed that, I would then say, well, let me call Richard. Let's put a connection together because it's out of the, you know, just out of the blue. I would have never guessed that. So to listen for what people say or what questions they may ask would then trigger you to know, hey, we've got some potential here, you know. Maybe not this year, but as his career or her career grows, or he could really be a big contributor for us in the future. And that's what you do. You're constantly building off that original conversation, comment that was made, and then just follow up. You know, it's easy, you know. So
if you listen, I think it's easy.
It is.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Let's say I am on the phone tonight and I heard something that you said, and I reach out to you, and it's kind of a cold call, and I say, hi, Willie, this is Beverly, and I'm calling you from the cat shelter, and I heard you had cats. I'd like to talk to you more about our organization. Would you be willing to have coffee with me?
Mm-hmm. If I got that kind of call, yeah, I would receive the call. Either meet me for coffee at Starbucks or, you know, wherever, and listen to them. I don't like to solicit over the phone on a cold call as much as solicit the opportunity for a meeting. One-on-one or even a small, I'd like to visit, you know, so
Yeah.
because I'm a big cat lover, I would be interested in talking to them.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. If you can connect them to something. I made cold calls when I first started working, and some of them can be miserable.
Yeah.
I mean, you knew when they picked up the phone what they thought about you. So, I mean, they didn't want to be bothered. And so I just kind of stopped doing that and started in on the friend gets the friend idea. And I found out that that was the best way of doing it. And then once you get one hook, it's just kind of like a ladder, and you just keep going from left to wrong. Yes. And,
so one of my core tenets is that donors don't necessarily need more cups of coffee. What they really need is connectors to things that they're passionate about. And so one of the questions that I use, if somebody introduces to me and we have a first conversation, I might ask, Willie, tell me, you're so involved in the community. What are your top 3 philanthropic priorities? What is so meaningful to you? How does that question feel to you? Does it feel too intrusive? Does it feel...
No, I mean, I'm all over the map in that regard, but to me it would be easy to say, Methodism, because I'm a Methodist, McNeese because of education, and community in general would be just, when you said that, those are the first 3 things I thought of. So, and I think most people do, because everybody has a passion about something, and it's just trying to discover what that is and where it fits into the puzzle of fundraising as it relates to community organizations such as the folks on this conference call.
I like that question because it feels safe, but it also gets to the heart of, tell me what you're interested in, what you're passionate about. And it's not, I have been asked that question and I haven't found it offensive.
No,
I'll tell somebody this is where I am, but tell me, but it gives me space, but I'm here. I'm spending my hour with you. Tell me about your organization.
Right.
How do you cue somebody that you might be interested in their organization?
I'm sorry, how would I what?
How would you give a fundraiser a cue that you would be more interested in their organization? What is something that you might say to them?
Well, depending on what they share, but assuming they give you the basics of what they're trying to do, when, how, and I might ask, well, what have you previously done? How much money have you already raised? What is your measurable goal? How are you going to go about this? So, because I've been on the flip side of that, I think there's some very specific questions that you need to be ready to answer. So back to the basic before you actually make the call, whether it's cold call or not, is how well prepared are you? So think through what am I doing? I'm passionate about this, but do I know all the facts? And then you're not ready to have that conversation. So you need to make sure you know who you're talking to and a little bit about them. You need to know everything about your organization that you're passionate about, which is, you can't just say we're raising money, would you write us a check? You need to say this is the purpose of our organization. I've been involved for 10 years or 2, whatever that is. Show your commitment. I'm financially contributed. I've been involved on this board for a long time, and I can tell you this is a very effective organization in our community, and hear the reason why, and give them some specifics, like we $10,000 and we were able to provide 10 scholarships, or what that is. But that will perk the interest of the person willing to at least meet with you and possibly contribute to you. But if you don't know those basic facts, you're not going to lose them, but you're going to not succeed at that meeting for that reason.
Well, I love that you shared that here. It really ties back to the case for support. What you just ran down is somebody has to be prepared. A fundraiser needs to be prepared with that case for support, the who, what, when, where, why, how much, what's the
Right.
return on impact, and have defended that to their board and others and tested it before they go to a major gift solicitation. Now, one of the things that I think surprises fundraisers is how sophisticated the donor base is when you get into the major gift conversation. So it may be new to you as a fundraiser, but you know, Willie's made major gifts, Richard's made major gifts, Laura's made major gifts. The questions that they're asking are investment impact level questions. So you have to up your game as a fundraiser, and the way to do that is a case for support. Richard, would you agree with that? Would you?
Yes, and I think you need to get your board. We have a minimum that the board has to give annually. And
Tell us about that.
I go to them when they are nominated for the board, or somebody that nominated them will go to them. And we have a sheet, one sheet of paper, and it tells all of your responsibilities being on the board, how many committees, the different names of the committees. But one of the most important thing is that they make an annual contribution. Right now it's $1,700 a year. And they know that up front, and all of a sudden we don't bill them for that. And 100 of it goes to the director's memorial scholarship. And the other 1,600 can go to anything you want. Usually it'll go to their scholarship, it'll go to, you know, their favorite department or whatever like that.
So in times of campaign, when you have an annual fund requirement,
Right.
how do you build that into your campaign solicitation, your proposals to donors, or do you not? That's always a tricky thing in a campaign time. How do you handle
Well,
that?
normally if at McNeese, when they give, say, for instance, if they jump from $1,000 to $5,000, then we move them into that group, and they'll get certain things that they haven't gotten before. And that you can never give them too much information. Now, I don't believe in constant letters of asking them for more or anything like that. I think that, here's a good story. Basically, when someone dies and you give a memorial in their name, now it may go to your scholarship or whatever, but you give $300. So next year, when that anniversary comes around, we write you a letter and say, we just wanted to remind you that you gave $300 in memory of blah, blah, blah. You cannot imagine how many people just sit down and write you another check for $300.
That's right.
I
mean,
literally just got one of those letters. My best buddy died of ovarian cancer on the 19th of August last year, and I just got one of those letters. And I have to tell you, it's not an organization that I was passionate about or had affinity to, but she did, and I will gladly rewrite that check because it feels good to do that. It does.
And we also then write the people that are still in their family, the same ones we wrote before, and we'll say we received an
That's so lovely.
memory, and it really, you know, it touches their heart too.
Mhm.
Well, can we talk a moment about maximizing major gifts with planned gifts and putting will and estate plans into a major gift solicitation? Has McNeese participated in that, and what does that look like for you?
We've kind of, you know, participated. As a matter of fact, that's something that I would like to get more involved with, because I find that my involvement at McNeese is weaker with the oh, say 30 to 50 group in age.
Yeah.
And so, but I know a lot of people that are 50 and above, and I have talked about that too. And it's funny, things trigger certain things. I had a guy that I didn't even know had cancer, and he and I were just walking. And I said something about he had a nice house. And I said, you know, what are you going to do with that house? And I happened to know that he was trying to sell it and just couldn't get anybody interested in it or something. And in that case, he said, well, my plan was to give half here, half there, and so forth and so on. And I said, well, and Magnice was in the plan. And I said, well, I really appreciate that. And I said, Magnice really needs that. Well, we ended up getting a 60%, and the other group ended up with nothing. And I didn't say that, but that's how it turned out. And that donor was somebody that I had known since 1980. I mean, and they had given some money to scholarships, but never a huge amount, So.
I have gotten more comfortable over time having that conversation when I was sitting in the hot seat where you are, because I realized that most people can maximize their giving, and it's a simple conversation. Have you included XYZ in your estate plans? Let's go ahead and document that. 30% of campaigns wind up being planned gifts. Now, cash is king, especially if you want, if you're building something or, you need it right now. But don't forget, if you're in the major gift world and considering a campaign, to add on the question. And let me take the fear out of it for you. You don't have to be an expert in planned giving to ask that question, because you should not be giving tax or legal advice as the organization. Right. You say, hey, Willie, go have a conversation with your tax attorney or your accountant. But if you haven't considered maximizing your gifts, here's a way that you could do that. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Let me have that conversation. So I invite you to do that.
They're very easy to change. I mean, you can do a codicil or something like that. And I find the same thing. I never try to recommend anybody to do the will or anything like that. But I do tell them about our need. And I do know that a lot of times the last gift is the largest. And if you can, and I've had people that will leave us their house, and you had no idea. There's one guy that left us his house. He had never given anything to Magnice.
Isn't that amazing?
The Magnice Library, and he would walk across campus. He never drove any place, and he would go to the library and then go to the grocery store and then walk home. And I knew him from the library, and so he and I would talk, and I'd see him on campus. I'd say, "How you doing?" Well, next thing I know, he dies, and the house is willed to Magnice. So,
wow,
you come up with some great surprises.
Yeah, I'm sure. One of the questions that somebody asked us leading into this evening, and I think it. Of late has become a really hot and maybe even controversial topic, and that's the idea of naming, room naming, building naming. I know down the street in my alma mater, they just had some really difficult conversations. How are boards, and I'm not putting Magnice on the spot, but how do you feel about naming? What policies do you need to have in place before you just slap somebody's name on there? What does that look like? And should you even consider it?
Basically, we've done that brick thing, where you put the brick in, and it's got your name on it or somebody in memory of or something. We copied something from LSU, and we now have something called Endow an Oak.
Oh, nice.
And so I actually went to LSU and took pictures of them. We're using the same people that you get your plaques from.
Yeah,
We,
they do good work.
That's right. And
Copy and steal everything. If y'all didn't hear that, copy other people who have done it because they've been through all the headaches. Call them and ask them how to do those things.
well, and they were very easy to contact, and of course they like, since I'm an LSU graduate, for me didn't know, but I hadn't done that, I must admit. But it was a lot of information, and one of the people that suggested it to us, we were going to lose some oak trees to a roadway type thing, and we immediately got those endowed, and that changes the whole game once you do that, because you got somebody's name on it, and they don't want to make anybody mad. And the other thing that we had was when we built a theater, we did name a chair.
Name a chair, yeah.
Just a simple little thing, but it was $1,000.
Yeah.
They could put it over several years or whatever.
Yeah.
We never take anything for more than 5 years. 5 years is their limit. But some people, they did their 250, and got it all done. And we didn't get as much, and all that money went to performing arts.
So it was dedicated.
Scholarships, yeah.
It was dedicated.
And that way it was, a lot of involvement. And we still have things like that you can do.
Yeah.
And like that theater thing, we got one just the other day. And of course, in Down Oak, you never have enough money because that all goes into endowment. And it all is for
that tree,
as well as making sure they don't have termites and all that stuff. So somebody does.
So how about you, Willie? You serve on a multitude of boards. Some probably have naming policies, some don't. How do you, as a board member, what questions do you want to know? And how do the boards that you serve on approach that particular issue? Naming, don't name?
Well, for one thing, I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel. So if, based on what that organization is, what happens with that type of organization throughout the country, and how did they do it? So those are the kind of questions I would ask based on the type of nonprofit that they are, and then let's see what other people do. And we've learned that over and over, whether in the junior league, when I was very involved in the junior league, plethora of comparisons across the country, and you say, well, that's just what we were thinking. So
call your peers.
Instead of a blank sheet of paper, we had huge amounts of statistics that we could compare. Community Foundation, another great example. I mean, we're not the first community foundation in the country, so we've learned through Sarah so much about the successes that they've had to determine, back to your point about naming, whether it's appropriate for that organization and in what ways can you do that, so those are the kind of questions as a board member you would want to know. I'm happy to help. Explain to me why we would do this. Do they do this in other parts of the country? How do they? Why do they do it? How much does it cost? What is the money that they assign to those naming rights? If it's, a chair or a building or whatever that might be. Some people too, and I think you have to be sensitive to, many donors really want to be anonymous.
They really do. They want to be confidential.
I'm happy. I mean, I've had them tell me, I'll give you $50,000, but I don't want my name on anything. And I've not even said I was going to name, I was just suggesting. And so you be sensitive about that donor and respect that, they don't want recognition. That's,
Yeah, we're seeing that right now in Louisiana news. This week, Xavier announced a $20 million gift, and it is a truly anonymous gift. And There's more press on an anonymous gift and speculation around who gave it. But it is our trust under the Donor Bill of Rights as fundraisers to really honor recognizing people in the way in which they want to be raised. And I'll use this example. I was recognized not too long ago, and it wasn't a major gift by a lot of thresholds. It was significant, but not outrageous. And the recognition came Dr. William and Mrs. Dr. William and Mrs. Beverly Thompson. I didn't want to be recognized, but if I do, you better spell my name right. And he didn't get the degree, right? So I was like, hold up. So I think it's don't presume, ask is one of them.
Right.
And I want to state this for the record, for those of you that are considering going and asking for major gifts. You must have a gift acceptance policy that tells you how you're going to say yes to gifts and also tells you how you're going to say no to gifts. And a no to a gift is you might not want somebody's boat on the bottom of the ocean or the artwork that they're cleaning out of their garage, right? So how are you going to say yes and how are you going to say no in a gift acceptance policy? If you're going into a campaign, you need to consider a gift counting policy. What gifts are you going to count? What gifts are you not going to count? Are you going to count a 40-year-old that's left you in their will that could be changed? Probably not. Or you're going to discount it. So how are you going to count policy? And that's because you want to win, but you want to win legally, and you want to push, frankly, your board and others towards cash gifts. Another policy, go ahead.
No, one thing that we do is, like in the case of Down Oak or something, we always send the donor just what we are turning in to the person and have them tell
Approve
us.
it.
Yes,
They
because
approve it should be in the
you're paying several
proposal.
$100s for that plaque.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to just end up with a
Yeah.
big paperweight on your test.
When you get into major gifts, you should provide somebody with a gift agreement that really spells out the how are we going to thank you and recognize you. I would add to that naming and endowment policy.
Yeah, the scholarship. I mean, you know, because
What's the threshold?
we want to make sure that it's in both their names. Some people will not. We had a funny one at the country club one time where they were naming holes, and you know, the 18 holes, you know, and somebody got a divorce, and he paid for a new plaque. His wife didn't play golf.
I may or may not have been in an office in a building that plaque got removed because of a wife. I'm not kidding. Well, I cannot believe it, but it is 5:59, and these.
Can I say one thing?
Please, yes.
Events are, that's something that I have never really enjoyed. It puts a lot of work on the staff, and it's usually for a very little money. And if I think I can go out and get $5,000 from somebody, or do this event that takes 50 or 60 hours, I would rather go out and try to get the $5,000 because it really is time-consuming. And I know a lot of people do events, and God bless you, but that's just something that I've never ever enjoyed, and I wanted to put that out.
Well, we're going to have a conversation on events, and I want everybody to realize, to hear that. Events raise awareness. They don't always raise money. Richard, what a gift. And you said something in our prep call that I want to say today, and I want to give you 1 minute to say it. Richard said, not everybody's generous. Spend time with people who are generous. It has nothing to do with wealth.
Right.
So that's a big deal, and that's hard to
really
recognize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've got to, I'll tell you what, you can turn them around sometimes, but normally if they're not charitable, it's hard to do.
Don't waste your time.
You know, big and big and big.
Well, I want 3 more hours with Richard and Willie, but I know we need to wrap up. Willie, you know, I'm just a fangirl of yours on every level. You're so amazing. And I know the 45 people on this call actually feel the same way. Thank you for your time and really the talent and the gift of service that you give to this community. And Richard, also just such a pleasure to get the opportunity to visit with you. You are a hero to everybody on this call, and 2 hours of your time is significant. So thank you for that.
We don't have enough Willies.
We don't have enough Willies. We need a digital. Somebody give a gift for a digital printer, and we'll reproduce Willie Mount and last week Laura Beach. Good grief! What amazing strong women you have in your community, and that leads to a major thank you to Sarah Judson for all that she does at the Community Foundation and for hosting us, and of course the Junior League of Lake Charles. No doubt that we have strong, powerful women on these calls, and the gift of Richard, who knows how to harness that talent. So thanks to everybody who joined us this evening, and we'll let Sarah wrap up in the 1 minute.
Yes, and Richard, thank you for sharing your birthday.
Happy birthday!
From the Margaret.
Happy birthday!
I love the cake.
It really has been just a wealth of information. I saw some of that going on in the chat, how much people appreciate what both of you have shared. And also a reminder to everybody in the group that we will again send a survey out tomorrow. And we really appreciate your feedback. It's very helpful to have takeaways that we can share with other people as well. And these are also being recorded, and they will be on our website for the Community Foundation as well as the Junior League. It might take us a few days because they're very robust, has a lot to download, but we will get it out there. So if you want to share it with other people on your team, we will have it available to do so.
And I will tell you that, you know, I meet with several fundraisers throughout the year, and I'm always open if somebody wants to meet with me, and I give them the best I can of how to do things. I enjoy fundraising. I always have, and just exciting work, you know, meet people, and then you get a dollar and you feel great.
It's so great. Well, thank you all for your time and your attention. I hope there is cake on the end of this call, Richard. Happy birthday. And to all of you, have a wonderful night. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.